We now present another edition of Slate Accidents. Ow, my hand! Ow, my eye! Oh, I dropped it on my toe!
Welcome back into the Rowdy Studio, where we are here to talk about the epic weekend that was the Daytona 500. Well, the epic week that was race weekend.
Have you ever in your life?
Oh my God!
The fire?
Nuts! Cock-a-mamie.
I mean, the dude, something breaks. Juan Pablo wipes out and hits a jet dryer, and the whole thing just explodes in flames.
It was just crazy, and I'm afraid that all of this stuff is going to make us lose sight of the fact that Matt Kenseth won the Daytona 500. Remember that?
Yeah, pretty awesome.
Well, the Roush Fenway cars, they were just really the entire span of Speedway weeks. They were kind of the cream of the crop, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, you had to feel like the Fords had the advantage, and it may have come under the hood. I mean, I think it probably did come from under the hood. They had the advantage that allowed them to run up front for a lot of the race, to dictate a little bit, insofar as you can do that at Daytona. And Matt Kenseth found himself out there at the end. But what was very interesting was watching Greg Biffle and Dale Jr. team up and not be able to run Kenseth down as a two-car tandem, which surprised the heck out of me. It certainly seemed to surprise the heck out of Greg Biffle and Dale Jr.
Well, Denny Hamlin spent almost the entire race in the outside line trying to orchestrate some sort of two-car tandem attack, and it never really worked. Everybody we talked to before Speed Week said the two-car tandem will win this race, and what we saw was that the two-car tandem really was ineffective.
And you gotta say, whoever figured out the rules package, I did not think it could be done. I did not think it could be done. Whoever figured it out deserves a big, fat raise.
It was me. The other thing I want to say about Matt Kenseth and the Roush Fenway Fords, the Roush Yates engines, is Matt Kenseth was pushing water throughout that race.
Yep.
Right?
And the thing survived.
And the thing survived. He never completely overheated. It never became such a problem that he had to pull into pit road for an extended period of time. Yet he was pushing water from almost the beginning of the race.
And that's another aspect to the rules package. Obviously, you're taking a toll on the engines because of what you're talking about. They overheat so quickly because of where the pressure release valve was set. And yet that wasn't a huge factor in the race either. Obviously, for the guys who had engine problems, it was. But for the most part, that wasn't a big deal either. So again, I say congratulations to NASCAR. What
was almost a bigger deal was the fluctuating fuel pressure a couple of guys faced, maybe because of electronic fuel injection, and that's something to keep an eye on and to check back in with as the season proceeds. Now, as the season proceeds, you got a couple of guys now really in a hole.
Well,
Jimmy Johnson.
Jimmy could be in a bigger hole if they take points away for the rules infraction.
Which they probably will.
You would think they would.
Jeff Gordon's in kind of a hole. How big of a deal is this? It's the first race of the season.
It's probably not a big deal. I'm going to say it's probably not a big deal. It could be. If you have one of those seasons where you have a couple other bad luck races and things start to go wrong, you might look back and say, man, lap one of the Daytona 500, that cost me a lot. Because in this point system, it's going to be, especially with the penalty, it's going to be as if Jimmy Johnson didn't even make the race. In fact, it's going to be worse than that because he'll probably have negative points.
He'll start with negative points.
Right? So that's a pretty big blow. Jimmy Johnson, Chad Knaus, the 48 team, they've got the speed to overcome that in 25 races. I think they will. It is certainly possible that you look back and say, wow, this is making our life really difficult. I wouldn't start talking about wild card and stuff like that just yet. Jimmy could win Phoenix easily.
Not only do they have the speed to overcome it, they've got the racing smarts and the patience to overcome it. We're not talking about Juan Pablo Montoya. Remember, last year Juan Pablo Montoya started the season with a few DNFs, and he just pushed and pushed and pushed and took unnecessary risks as a result throughout the season.
Well, it may have been that he didn't have the equipment to make it up.
Perhaps.
He may, and I think Jimmy Johnson is going to have the equipment.
But I also think, my point is that I don't think Jimmy Johnson will panic.
No.
And I think that's the key. So I agree with you. I don't think it's that big of a deal for Jimmy Johnson. We are not guys who like to kiss the butt of NASCAR. We like to be honest.
I'm not really a butt kisser of anybody.
But let's give credit where credit is due. This was a very difficult weekend for both the track and for the sanctioning body, and I think both entities handled it as well as anybody could expect.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if you look at, for example, the rain, moving the race to Monday and then making a very early call to move it to prime time, 7 p.m., was definitely the right thing to do. Who could have predicted the fire That was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. They handled it
bizarre.
really well. I don't think that, 2-hour delay at that point kind of sucks.
You could have easily have seen them say, we're going to call the race now, Dave Blaney's the winner.
Right.
And really, that would have been the easiest
It would have been a
decision to make.
defensible decision, but
Yeah.
I think they did the right thing by cleaning it off. The track withstood it, which I and Steve Letarte apparently assumed there was no way they were going to be able to run on that thing with jet fuel just burning.
Most of the drivers said, oh, this patch isn't going to hold, yet it did.
It did. So I think credit all around to, as you say, Daytona National Speedway and NASCAR itself. They made the right decisions. And it's a shame it was tough. It was tough to watch Danica go out on, lap 1 and Jimmy go out on lap 1. It was tough to have the thing pushed from Sunday to Monday night. And then what looked like it might be a nice finish at 10:30 p.m. East Coast time ended up being 1 a.m. And they handled it about as well as you could.
I can't think of a single decision that I wish they had done different. Well, I mean, they can't control the weather.
No.
You can't foresee a jet dryer exploding in turn 3. These are not predictable scenarios.
No.
So hats off to both Joey Chitwood and his staff at Daytona and NASCAR for the way they handled a really, really difficult weekend.
Absolutely. And now the meat of the season is upon us.
It is. We need to get into a rhythm. We need to get into our racing rhythm.
Absolutely.
And we'll be right here in rhythm, so make sure you check back.
Rowdy.com. Say it like it is.
Say what like it is?
Rowdy.com.